Hello and welcome back to the video on the Football Zone and to a weekend previewing all of the Premier League and Championship action coming up this weekend, and starting off with a big game in the race to the top four. Arsenal host Manchester United on Saturday lunchtime, and yeah, this is massive. Arsenal obviously buoyed by that huge win against Chelsea last time out, and Manchester United, really disappointing result, it has to be said, against Liverpool last time out, but it's kind of expected. And yeah, just looking off the most recent games, you'd have to say Arsenal to be considered favourite here, especially at home, so I'm going to say home win. Moving on then, Leicester take on Aston Villa at the King Power Stadium, and Leicester, they were on a decent run of form, but they've lost the last, winless in the last two games now, a loss and a draw, which is disappointing. But having said that, Villa are on terrible form themselves, losing the last four games, and not been great for Steven Gerrard recently, sat in 15th in the table, but Leicester and Knights still got an opportunity to finish the season relatively strong, and I think they'll get the victory here. I'm going to say 2-0. Moving on then, Manchester City take on Watford at the Etihad, and Manchester City, good win last night against Brighton. Was getting a bit nervy when it was 0-0 at half time, but in the end they came through pretty comfortably against the Watford side, who've lost the last three, really struggling at the moment and are on their way down. So a home win here is probably the only logical result, but you never ever know with football. But I'd be very, very surprised if Manchester City drop points in this one, so I'm going to say 3-0 to City. Moving on then to Norwich as they take on Newcastle at Carrow Road, and this is an interesting game because Norwich, they've not been terrible recently. A win, a draw and a loss in the last three, not too bad. But Newcastle have won the last three and are absolutely flying under Eddie Howe, up to 11th now. Remarkable how quickly their season's turned around, really. And they'll come into this one full of confidence, won't they, against the Norwich side, let's face it, are all but down. But I can see Norwich clinging on to a point here, to be honest. I think they might have a chance of just clinging on something with improved form. Moving on then, Brentford take on Tottenham at the Brentford Community Stadium. And this is an interesting game. Obviously Tottenham can't afford to drop points. Now it looks like Arsenal back in form following that win at Chelsea. Brentford, they're well clear of the relegation zone now, and they can kind of start playing this next season. I think their job is done for this season. Staying up, that's all it was ever going to be. And they seem to have done that relatively well. It'll be interesting one this game, but I can see Tottenham getting a win here. I'm going to say 2-0. They should win this one. Brighton take on Southampton in the Premier League on Sunday, and this is an interesting game. Brighton, obviously, doing, I'd say, pretty well at the moment. Obviously had the City game recently, which they lost, but that was always a bit of a free hit. But 6 points from Tottenham and Arsenal, that's a great return. And Southampton, kind of just a bit inconsistent at the moment. Obviously got that win against Arsenal, but been poor in games like Burnley and Chelsea 6-0, really not good at all. So for this one, I'm backing Brighton to bounce straight back and pick up the victory here. I'm going to say 1-0. Moving on then to a game between Burnley and Wolves at Turf Moor, and this is an interesting one. Michael Jackson's obviously done a really good job at Burnley since he's come in, 4 points from 6, and Wolves losing to Newcastle last night was a bad result, so they'll be hoping to bounce back and still get into the European Conference League at least. It's an interesting one, this one, hard to call. It's a game which you really feel could go either way, with lots riding on it, but I just feel like Wolves are slightly better team at the moment and can pick up the victory. I'm going to say 1-0. Next up, in a big game in the race for Europe, Chelsea take on West Ham, and Chelsea want to recover off the back of that disappointing defeat to Arsenal last time out, and West Ham, a 1-1 draw against Burnley last time out, not a great result really, and they're kind of just clinging on to the 7th place. Of course, if they don't win the Europa League, still want to get into Europe by some way, they're kind of clinging on to that, so they need points. But Chelsea, relatively comfortable in third, but they'll want to bounce back, don't they? I think it'll be a close game, but I can see Chelsea picking up the victory. I'm going to say 2-0. Moving on then to Liverpool as they host on Everton at Anfield, and Liverpool, they'll come into this one full of confidence, aren't they? Comfortable wins really over Manchester City and Manchester United in the last few games, just showing how good they are. Everton a bit of improved form recently, Liverpool, they'll still be considered heavy favourites against the Everton side. Let's face it, really aren't great at the moment, are they? I'm going to say 2-0 to Paul. Moving on then to the final game of the Premier League season, Premier League game week on Monday, is Crystal Palace host Leeds. And Palace, they have their last 3 games, they have been playing some decent stuff, but still a bit of a disappointing run of form. Down to 14th in the table now. And Leeds, unbeaten in 4-1 3 of those games. So, they're on a bit of a roll at the moment, Leeds. So they'll come into this one full of confidence. It's a tough one to call, but I think Palace with home advantage will get the win, to be honest. Moving on then to Huddersfield as they take on Barnsley in the Championship on Friday night. And yeah, anything less than a win, I think Barnsley are down here, if my maths is correct. And yeah, Huddersfield on a great run of form at the moment and looking pretty comfortable in the playoff positions, aren't they now? It'll take a massive result for them to drop out, which just won't happen now. So yeah, they can start preparing for the playoffs. Barnsley all but down. It did look a few weeks ago like maybe they could chase Reading, but that's just kind of pieces out, and I think Huddersfield will put Barnsley out their misery here. Moving on then to Saturday's action, and Luton take on Blackpool at Kenilworth Road. And yeah, this is an interesting one because Luton obviously have been on a bit of a shaky run, but 2 wins over Easter, and yeah, that's put them in a really comfortable playoff place. But Blackpool got that incredible 6-1 win against Birmingham last time. I didn't see that coming because their recent form had been a bit shoddy, but still, yeah, I'm home advantage here. I'm going to back a Luton win. I'm going to say 1-0. Moving on then to Birmingham as they take on Millwall at St Andrews. And Birmingham, 3 losses on the trot. Lebo, you're reportedly on the verge of the sack. It wouldn't surprise me if it came at the end of the season, because they just haven't been great recently at all, have they? And then you've got Millwall on a decent little run, 7 points from the last 9, and yes, suddenly just outside the pass. So they've got everything to play for still against an average Birmingham side, and I can see them picking up the victory. I'm going to say 2-1. Moving on then to Bournemouth as they take on Fulham at the Vitality Stadium. And Bournemouth, unbeaten in 3, only won one of those games, but it was last time out, 3-0 win against Coventry, and they're looking in a good position now to secure promotion, aren't they? I can't see any other team challenging them now. Fulham obviously promoted last time out, won the league, but I kind of feel like maybe their standards may have dropped slightly in the last few days, which could hand a victory to Bournemouth here. Moving on then to Derby as they take on Bristol City at Pride Park, and of course Derby relegated with the results on Monday, which is obviously a great shame because of all the challenges they've had to overcome. They came so close, but it's a shame they couldn't get it over the line. They'll want to end their time in a high against Bristol City side who are showing improved form, just 1 loss in the last 5, but also 1 win in the last 5. But I think Derby will kind of sit on extra motivation, end their time in the Championship in a high, I think they might get a win here. I'm going to say 1-0. Moving on then, Hull take on Reading at the KCOM Stadium, and Hull, their form's been a bit away recently. 2 wins, 3 losses in the last 5 against the Reading side who have been really good. Just 1 defeat in the last 5, and really going on nicely under Paul Ince. Great run of form, and it's all but secured them safety, which is obviously massive for them. It's a tough one to call really. 2 teams that are doing relatively well at the moment, I can see them kind of just splitting the honours here. I'm going to say 1-1. Moving on then to Peterborough as they take on Nottingham Forest at the Western Home Stadium, and like Barnsley, Peterborough's kind of playoff hope, survival hopes have kind of just petered out, despite them picking up 2 wins in the last 2 and unbeaten in 4. It's a shame they just kind of left it too little too late. You do wonder what would have happened if they got Grant McCann in a bit sooner really. But Forest 4 wins from the last 5. I think that loss against Luton could cost them in the race for the autos, but you never know. But they're definitely favourites here, and I'm going to say 2-0 to Forest. Moving on then to Sheffield United as they host Cardiff at Bramall Lane. And Sheffield United, they're not on aggressive run of form at the moment, it has to be said really. Winless in 3, and just when they start to need to find some form, it's kind of all gone a bit wrong. But Cardiff have lost the last 2, so this is a big opportunity for Sheffield United to get back to winning ways, and it's something that they kind of have to do really, isn't it? And I do think they will get the victory. I'm going to say 2-0 to the Blades. Moving on then to Stoke as they take on QPR at the Bet365 Stadium. And Stoke, their form's pretty decent at the moment. I would say it's inconsistent, but I'd say pretty good. 1-0 win away at Blackburn last time. That was a great result. QPR obviously had that horrible run of form. That's cost them a shot at the playoffs. Last 2 games have been pretty decent, so it could be a hard one to call. But I just feel like Stoke just slightly better at the moment, and will pick up the win at home. Moving on then to Swansea as they take on Middlesbrough at the Liberty Stadium, and it will be interesting to see how much that late collapse against Reading really did cost Swansea last night, because that was really, really poor. I think most Swansea fans will admit that. But it's against the Barrow side who are in a bit of questionable form at the moment, and a bit like Sheffield United when it really matters in 9th. But Perth still in their hands with a game in hand, so it's not, all hope has not been lost. But yeah, I can see it being a draw here. I just don't think Barrow can capitalise. Moving on then to West Brom as they take on Coventry at the Hawthorns, and both teams coming off the back of really disappointing losses last time out. West Brom obviously thrashed by Nottingham Forest, and Coventry thrashed by Bournemouth. So it's about responding for both of these teams. But how many times have we seen recently West Brom can have a terrible result and then just bounce back straight away? And I can kind of see a similar thing happening here, to be honest. I'm going to say 1-0 to West Brom. Moving on then to Preston as they take on Blackburn at Deepdale, and this is an interesting one because obviously Preston on a relatively decent run at the moment, I'd say, or at least going okayish, and Blackburn kind of just fading towards the finish line, really, and their playoff hopes aren't looking too great at the moment, but we know one win could change all of that. It's interesting to see which way it goes. I think it will be a draw though. I don't think there's much to separate the two teams, so I'm going to say 1-1. But anyway guys, that's it for the video. Thanks very much for watching. Remember to like, share, subscribe, no thoughts, comments down below, follow on to things, script for daily football news, and subscribe to my channel on screen, that'd be greatly appreciated. Thanks very much for watching. Peace.